In the course of this process, it's become apparent that your intent as a leader is the critical variable that affects your ability to lead others. What we're going to examine now is how your intent actually impacts on your ability to lead. In order to do that, we need to consider the following. In a sense, what we're saying is that fundamentally, there's two kinds of leaders in the world. There's those who are here to take from their subordinates, or those who are here to give to their subordinates. And in the first instance, what becomes apparent is that because most managers or leaders think that they're in the situation to achieve a result through their people, they're actually in the relationship to take. Now, what's important to understand about a person who's here to take from a subordinate is that he will base his relationship with the subordinate on his own needs. The significant thing in the relationship is what he's getting out of the subordinate rather than what he can give the subordinate. Consequently, the essence of this relationship is going to be about control. Because if I want something from you, I'm really only in the relationship to produce a predictable outcome. I'm therefore in the relationship to control you. Now, what's very important to understand about this leader is that he himself is a victim. And it's by the Fred Shoe rule. If you want something from somebody else, that person's ability to withhold what you want gives them power over you. In other words, you might have the rank, you might be more senior than them in authority, but because you try to get something out of them, you're actually under their thumb. And what's distressing about victims in command is that they tend to reproduce themselves. In other words, if you put a victim in charge, he'll generally make victims. If we go to the giving side of our argument now, what becomes apparent is that people who are here to give in leadership positions base their relationship with subordinates not on their own needs, not on what's expedient to them, but on the value that's operative in the situation that they're in. That suggests that they'll consistently pass the sincerity test, because in every situation where this person is faced with the difference between what's expedient and what's right, they will do what is right. And because they consistently pass the sincerity test, this person cultivates people who are loyal to them, this person gains power. This person, if you put this person in a position of command, he becomes a master. And you can describe a master as a person who actually does define things around him because he's here to give. And what's interesting about masters is if you put them in charge, they will reproduce themselves. So that's the difference between the taking and the giving side of our argument. I'd like to further impose on this distinction a further distinction, which is a taking or giving that either has an impact on people or things. And that then provides us the opportunity to create a four-quadrant model. And each one of these quadrants have a different diagnostic implication in terms of your ability to lead. The first quadrant we describe we call the quadrant of the megalomaniac. And this is a quadrant where what's important to you is significance. Now, as we indicated before, if you want significance from somebody, you're infinitely more manipulable than what you would have been if you just wanted things from them. Which means to say that if you take a need for significance into a relationship of command, you're in serious trouble. Now, this word of megalomaniac is not necessarily a useful word to understand the entire quadrant, because there's two ways that you can require significance from somebody else. The first is in a competitive way. When you're particularly competitive, you want to be in clear win-lose situations with other people, and you have to be the winner. Now, if you take that into a relationship of command, that becomes problematic, because what you're saying to your subordinate, I'm significant because you're insignificant. I'm big because you're little. And the job of the big one for the little one in any relationship of power is to care for them and grow them. So in other words, if you take a sentiment into a relationship of command that tells the other that your significance is based on their insignificance, that you're big because you're little, you're doing exactly the opposite to what you should be doing. You'll destroy those people over time and they'll destroy you. One of the very worst attributes in leadership is arrogance. Further to this, your requirement for significance can also be expressed in a way which is behaviorally opposite to being competitive, but actually carries the same disease. And that is any need that you have to be accepted by the group, any need for affiliation. If I have a need for affiliation, then it means that I'll find it very difficult to confront people when I need to confront them. I won't be able to upset people. That indicates that the need of competitiveness and the need for affiliation share a theme, and that theme is a need for significance. It really doesn't matter if it's this competitive or this affiliative side for the need for significance. If you take any need for significance into a relationship of command, you're in serious trouble. The diagnostic implication of this in terms of our model is -2. The next need we speak about we call the need of the consumer. And this is now a need for things rather than significance that you can only get from people. A very good example of a need in this quadrant is the need for security. If you have a tremendous need for security, you're not necessarily this manipulating megalomaniac, but you still can't be trusted. The next need that we're going to explore is the need of the consumer. The consumer is concerned with getting things rather than significance from people. A very useful example of a need that fits this quadrant is something like job security. If I have a need for job security, the implications for me aren't as serious as what it would be if I were a megalomaniac. However, it still means my subordinates can't trust me. Let me give you an example. Let's assume that I am a manager in a sales environment, and I work for John. And John is a very peculiar man. He's got a number of prejudices, and one of his prejudices is that he really has an issue with people who come from Grahamstown. Because when he was 2 years old, a person who happened to come from Grahamstown did something really cruel to him. And from that day forward, he decided that if the person comes from Grahamstown, you can't trust them. On the other hand, I've just employed a woman by the name of Sally. And let's assume that Sally's really good at what she does. However, she happens to have been born in Grahamstown. In fact, initially I don't even know about either this peculiar prejudice of my boss or the fact that Sally comes from Grahamstown. And as we indicated, this is a sales environment, and let's assume that Sally within a week does extraordinary things. Within 6 weeks, she's got our opposition sitting like frightened rabbits in the corner. And I realize I have a miracle maker on my hands here. This woman is a real rainmaker. And I go to my boss, John, and I tell him, listen, I've just employed this woman. Her name is Sally. She's done the most extraordinary things in my department. I mean, if you just have a look at these sales figures, it's like sales I've never seen before. I really don't think we should pay this woman a bonus yet because it's a bit soon, but we need to do something. It'll be catastrophic if she goes to the opposition. John looks at the sales figures and he is delighted. He says, this is fantastic. So he suggests we take the entire department out for a dinner. The night of the dinner arrives and we're all there. My entire department is there. John is there and Sally's there. And it so happens that Sally and John get seated next to each other at table. And what should surface in this conversation, unfortunately, is where she comes from.